Good evening, everyone. It is 6 p.m. on Wednesday. You know what that means? It's time for another edition of Wednesdays in the Word, the discipleship, midweek discipleship group of the Antioch Baptist Church. My name is Dwayne Hawkins, and I have the privilege to serve as pastor of the Antioch Baptist Church. And I want to welcome you this evening as you join us. Excited about our lesson in the Word on this evening, but we'll do what we typically do and take a minute or so to greet one another and have opportunity for you to check in and let us know how things are going. I am green on today. All is well, focused, ready to go. My emotions are properly regulated and I am excited about being here on this evening. So I want you to let us know that you're here. Tell me what your color is and how things are going. If you have any prayer requests, if you have any praise reports, anything going on that we can spend a moment to share life and connect with one another, that would be awesome. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, Elma. She says, good evening, Antioch, Omaha friends and family and viewers. Wonderful, wonderful. You are green and ready to go. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I am green. I am ready to go as well. And I made a decision today. I was outside shoveling and I decided that this will be my last year without buying a full size snowblower. That's the decision I came to today. I should not have been huffing and puffing the way that I was, worn out and out of shape, y'all. Y'all don't hear me. And I decided this is the last time. Next winter, I'm gonna do what I need to do and buy me a big old snow blower, big old light, powerful snow blower. Because this 56-year-old frame can't do it like I used to. Yeah, that was my decision while I was out there shoveling the snow today. Dee Dee, good evening. Glad that you are with us on this evening. And Dee Dee is green. Awesome, awesome sauce. Awesome sauce. Yeah, yeah. Dee Dee's got the laughing emoji. Yeah, I'm trying to tell you, I gotta get me a snow blower. It's getting harder and harder, y'all. It's getting harder and harder. Alma said, "Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. What's happening, Stacia girl? Good evening to you, Green. Awesome, 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 awesome. Hope the first half of the week has gone well for each and every one of you, and you are ready to go on this evening. Let's see. We got somebody in studio on camera. Dr. Deirdre Denise McKinley. How are you, ma'am?
I am well. How about you, Pastor?
I'm well. I'm well. I'm
I heard you're
well.
kind of worn out from shoveling the snow today.
Yeah. And the sad thing about it, I'm gonna tell you how sad it was. It was so sad because the snow was light. It wasn't that old heavy snow. It was light, and I could just really kind of push it on the ground. I didn't have to do a whole lot of lifting and throwing, and I was still tired. I was still tired. And I thought, I think it's about time for me to get me a snowblower. So
All right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know what to say about that, but I think that's just what it is.
Make it do what it do. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I just think that's just what it is. So next winter, I'm buying us. Maybe I'll buy it in the summertime, and maybe I'll get a sale or something. I don't know. I don't even know where to buy them or how to buy them. So if y'all got tips, tell me. I want the most powerful, the lightest, and the most powerful and the best. That's what I want. Yeah. I don't want no. I don't want no bottom of the line snowblower. I want a big one that's light, but that can get the job done. And I want one that you can turn and you can direct the snow if you want to blow it to the left or if you want to blow it to the right or if you want to blow it straight, depending on where the wind is blowing. That's the kind I want. Alma says go to Home Depot. That sounds about right. Home Depot or Lowe's. That sounds about right. Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, I guess the clock just keeps on ticking even for the pastor, y'all. That's what I'm getting out of that. The clock keeps on ticking. So y'all come on in. Let me know what your color is, how things are going. If you got anything you need to share, anything that we need to celebrate, any good news to celebrate, any prayers, any concerns that you got going on, let us know, and we will take a moment to extend some connection and care to whatever the need presents. So I don't have. We'll wait another minute or so. We'll see where the first lady is, and um, what I'm not gonna do, Alma, is get on my phone and call her, uh, and we're in the same house. I ain't calling nobody's names out, but that's what I'm not gonna do. So hopefully, well, maybe she might be finishing up a phone call, but anyways, come on in. Let me know what your color is. What's going on? Got anything good going on to celebrate? Got any concerns that we need to address? Any prayer request that you have? Come on in and share those with us. And then, um, well, I guess I do have one announcement that I want to share with you all. And let me go ahead and share my announcement. So, if your if you submitted your email to the church, you should have received an email from me on last evening around 8 p.m. So if you did not receive an email from me, that means that for whatever reason, I don't have it. Or if you signed up on the Connect page, then that will be a way to get on the email list. But hopefully you did. I sent out a bunch of them. And so check your emails to see if you got an email from me from, I think it might have been yesterday around 8 p.m. or so. So go ahead and read that. I have been working hard. Alan says I'd like to go to a CPR and defibrillator class for the congregation. So um, thank you for sharing that. Believe it or not, that is actually in the works. That the Antioch Kids is going to be sponsoring that for the entire church. We wanted to make sure that the people that are caring for our children are up to date on that type of stuff, and they're going to sponsor that for the whole congregation. So that is actually already in the works. We're doing some checking, and then we'll bring that back. So So back to the email. Click on the email if you didn't get it. Um, you can go to the church's Facebook page or probably my Facebook page either last night or this morning, and you can get it from there. But I've been working hard last week, and I was successfully able to, I believe, uh, to enhance our surrender index and make it such that it could be a smoother process that you can engage digitally as well. And that will allow you the opportunity to retake the assessment in a couple of months and be able to track your growth. And it will also give opportunity um, for me to see your names are not on there, so I won't know your names, and no one else gets your own assessment but you. But they are grouped by category, so I'll be able to see the composite score for the leadership, for the congregation, for the guest, and for the pastor. And we'll be able to track that growth over time and see how we are growing in our relationship with the Lord. So make sure you check your email and get on that email list. Otherwise, you can just go to the church's Facebook page and you can get the email from there. And then you could subscribe, or you could just go straight to the website to the About uh, tab and click on direction, and you can get the assessment from there. But the email is really kind of succinct and kind of everything you need to know, and you can click on this and click on that. So make sure you check that out. Did you check out that email, First Lady?
I did. I need to do the assessment, but I did check out the email.
Awesome sauce. Glad you're with us on this evening. What's your color is?
Green.
Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, so that was the only announcement. Check your emails, people, and if you didn't, make sure you sign up so that you can know what's going on, and you can share what's going on at Antioch with Antioch and others as well. All right, I had some technical problems. Let's see if we got it squared away. Are you ready? What a blessing. What a blessing. It is such a great thing for us to know that God has provided everything that we need through Him, and we learn about Him through His Word and our values of believing, being, belonging, becoming, as we seek to live those things out at the Antioch Baptist Church, and we can learn all about it in the Word of God. And I'm so excited about that, that God did not leave us hanging, that He made sure that we had access to His revealed Word. So, good evening, Karen. Glad to have you with us on this evening. You are green. Wonderful, wonderful. What is the temperature where you are at? The folk in Omaha in snow, we want to know, what is the temperature in your current location? Now, when you say it, don't be bragging. Just tell us what the temperature is, Don't be posting pictures of the beach and sunglasses and all that kind of stuff because we was out shoveling today. But if you wouldn't mind, we'd like to know what the temperature was.
They have it cold. It's cold there.
Oh, is it?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
They don't
well.
have any. It's not snow or anything like that. But she said it's very very cold. We talked earlier today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you know,
I mean, but what's very, very cold for them?
I
That's
right?
know. That's what
relative.
I. Yeah,
Co-
and I did tell her that it's nothing like here, and that's what
cold
she
is
said.
relative.
She said she's not coming to Nebraska.
I mean, if she talking
Nope.
about it's 30 degrees outside and and it's cold because it's 30 degrees outside, uh, then I'm gonna be
Yeah.
like, we're going to be in the 20s,
Oh wow.
going to be in. Well, relatively speaking, that is cold.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking, that is cold, but
We're gonna be in the negatives.
right. Right. I'm glad, Karen. I'm glad that it's only going down to the 20s tonight. I'm so grateful. You down there suffering for the Lord in the 30s, and I'm praying that y'all hold on in these last and evil days. That's what I'm praying for y'all. That's what I'm praying for y'all. All right. So, good people, we are talking about justice. We kicked off last week talking about a. She said, "Y'all can have it." Thank you. We kicked off last week talking about um, Black History Month, right? And how Black History Month, in my estimation, is a healthy initiative that ultimately comes from a proper understanding of God and man. And so that's what we talked about yesterday. We had a great discussion last week in our Wednesdays in the Word, and we were able to share some confessions about some of the struggles and hindrances and being made in God's image. And I just wanted to build on that on this week. The last part of the sermon was about persevering, persevering through difficulties. Hey, Aunt Johnny, glad that you are with us on this evening. It was about persevering through difficulties. And there's another aspect. It kind of goes hand in hand with persevering, and that is fighting for justice. And I want to make the case that they go hand in hand. It's one thing to be able to endure the difficulties, but God wants us to do more than endure or persevere or hold on. I believe He also wants us to fight for justice. And so I built on last sermon, the first sermon intentionally, and then next week we're going to take another step and we're going to build on what we talked about Sunday and tonight. But I just wanted to introduce the notion of fighting for justice. And if we're going to fight for justice, that there is a right way and a wrong way to fight for justice. And there are two things really that were kind of in the back of my mind. One is the fact that we are all image bearers of the God of creation. And then number two, as believers, we are also ambassadors or witnesses of the God of redemption. And so our approach to justice has to account for both of those realities, representing the God of creation and the God of redemption. And in my introduction, I said it's the same God. The God who made, the God who in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, is the same God who sent Jesus to die for us. It's the same God, and He has revealed Himself to us in three primary ways: creation, the Bible, and Jesus Christ. That's how we know about God. He has to reveal Himself in ways that we can comprehend. Otherwise, we would not be able to comprehend God, because He's greater than us. And so He revealed Himself. He made Himself known to us primarily in three ways: creation, the Bible, and Jesus. And everything we know about God comes from one of those three places: creation, the Bible, and Jesus Christ. And so we look to His word to see what He has revealed to us about justice. Of course, we could also look to Jesus, but since Jesus has ascended, everything we know about Jesus also comes from His word. And so that's why we need to look at what the Bible has to say about justice. And so that led us to the text, Micah 6:8. He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. That particular passage of scripture, for me, gives us an excellent framework for how we approach justice in the world as image bearers of God and as ambassadors of God, all contained in that one passage. So the thesis of the sermon was pretty simple. God calls us to uphold His standards and engage in godly actions as we fight for justice in our world. Um, and I'm just kind of reflecting, because I made a rather bold statement, and in my study time, it just hit me that one of our esteemed civil rights leaders in our nation's history, Malcolm X, was born in Omaha. You can literally go to a place in Omaha and acknowledge the fact that he was born, and there's a whole deal. And he said, by any means necessary. And it was in my preparation time that that phrase was brought back to my memory. And when I thought about the fact that we are image bearers, and as believers, we are witnesses of the God of redemption, and that when we fight for justice, we can't just fight for justice any old kind of way. It's got to align itself with what God has shared with us in His word. And because God is concerned not with just what we do, but how we do it. And it was a rather bold statement to say what he said don't line up with what God said. And clearly, I understand that I'm not the only one to say that, uh, but I did say it, and it did come out of my mouth, and I meant it. Because when I read this passage and I studied and reflected, I thought, oh my goodness, um, what he said is not a godly framework. And um, I guess I'm curious to know what y'all thought about that statement. Did you think I was crazy? Did it hit you different? Have you always held that position? What do you think about his approach not lining up with what God clearly says in his word. Any thoughts?
Well, not knowing him, just studying him after his passing, so I can't speak on behalf of his beliefs and what he believed in, just knowing what we had studied. But I also, at that moment of what the time where he was trying to make a difference in the life of our people and what was going on at that time, that statement came out the way it came out because that's what needed to take place at that time. I don't know how biblical he was, how much he his relationship with the Lord. I know he was in the what is it called?
Muslim.
Nation of Islam and things like that. So I can't me, studying him and knowing the history behind all of that. At that time, he was just really keen on doing what's right for the people. Well, he was seeing how Martin's movement was getting beat up. Yeah, and he was seeing how Martin's movement was getting beat up at the time, which was more biblical and trying peaceful and everything. So he just went totally to the opposite side. But we all know, well, those who studied the history, and after he went to Africa and Mecca, he came back and he was more in line with MLK, and that's why they're both are not with us today.
Wow, that's a lot, Didi. That's a that's a lot. I too have not studied him in great detail. I mean, I know a little bit, and there was the movie a couple decades back ago that was pretty popular. Um, and I guess what I want to say is that when it comes to social issues, we may not always agree on everything, but there are some areas of social concern and social good that um, that can be agreed on, and in terms of what he was fighting for and the need to fight for justice. um, I see commonalities and common ground. But there are just certain things about that, um, to a lesser degree, serving not only Antioch but working in the community. Um, there are times when I share space with people whose spiritual beliefs I don't hold to, um, but in terms of social the good of society as a whole, there are times where I do, and just knowing um, where to draw that line, I think is important. Um, that's my thought.
I think I understand why he got to that point when all else failed. It was just kind of, we got to do what we got to do. I understand the mindset. And I think even I believe it was Martin Luther King that even came out that had another quote. It's not nearly as widely used, but talked about gosh, and I can't even think of how it said, but about how whatever it was what happened. This is what people do when they try to peacefully protest and it gets nowhere. I can't remember what the saying was. I'll have to go and look it up. But so I get why it got there, but I agree that yes, it's not godly. It can't just be by any means necessary. We can't stoop to their level, so to speak. But I do understand the frustration of the time.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. Was that something along the lines of riots are the language of the unheard?
Say that again.
Riots are the language of the unheard. No, maybe.
Yes.
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 Yeah. 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 So anyways, I just think it's important to know that we do represent God as image bearers, but we also represent him as witnesses. And we need to be mindful of what we do and how we do it when we fight for justice. Um, so the text helped us to kind of think about these godly standards that he said in the verse. Um, what is good and what meets his requirements. And I think it's important because, excuse me, because it's in the word. It's important because God gave it to us. He revealed it to us that there are standards if it's going to be in the category of what would be classified as godly. And um here we go. Right is the language of the unheard. 1966. MLK said that in 1966. Yeah, it is an explanation of why things take place. Um, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And so those standards really are about his character and his commandments. As I just kind of thought about it further since Sunday, what is good is a reflection of his character, and what meets his requirements ultimately comes from his commandments. And as I said in the sermon, if it contradicts loving God, loving self and others, then it ain't godly. I don't mean it's just as plain. All of his commandments, meeting his requirements, everything in the Old Testament is summed up in the great commandment: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and all your mind. And second is like unto it: love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets are summed up in those two. And if it doesn't meet the standard of love, it's something, but it ain't godly. And as witnesses, we should strive to uphold godly standards, and that which is good and that which meets his requirements is good because it's a reflection of his character. It meets his requirements because it lines itself up with God's commandments. And the more we go along our Christian journey and our time at Antioch, and we can always go back to the great commandment. If we ever struggle about a decision, we can filter it through. Is it according to truth, and is it according to love? Um, and does it demonstrate love for God, love for self, love for others? If you're ever struggling with the right thing, I heard Pastor Terry say that one time several years ago. Do the loving thing, because the loving thing is always the right thing to do. And it just stuck in my head. And it's just so true. And so those are the standards. And then there are the actions that come from those standards. Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with our God. And so in order to do justice, thank you, Aunt Johnny. She says God gives us what we need for his people at this time. I think he does, so that we can meet his standards. Um, we're not doing God's will his way through sin. It just that just doesn't it doesn't line up with God's standard. It's a standard, but it ain't His. You can call it what you want, but you can't call it godly. So that means He must provide for us a way to honor Him in circumstances. Thank you for sharing that. So the due justice, it has to do with engaging in the work of justice, and y'all, it requires courage. It requires courage, standing boldly for what is right, despite the opposition, whether that opposition is people or systems, and or people and systems. It's not people or systems. It's people and systems. That requires uh, courage. I remember a couple years ago, before David left, where he went to City Hall and gave testimony on a particular issue before the city council. And I happened to be there on that occasion. And I can't remember what the issue was, but it was a proud papa moment, because my son was very courageous, um, to go before people and systems and stand up for what he felt was right. And I don't know if you've ever testified in a hearing down at the legislative chambers, down at the Capitol in Lincoln, or if you've stood before OPS board meetings or the city council. If you've ever done those things, um, I'm here today to tell you, as one who's done that on few occasions, maybe 3 or 4 different occasions, that to look those people in the eye and to stand on what you believe is right, with godly conviction, uh, it it takes courage, to sign your name on that piece of paper, to stand before the people, and they say your first and last name and spell it, and it's a matter of public record, and your name is associated with this position for this or against that. um it it's just the example that comes to my mind at this moment as to what an example of what courage looks like in a fight for justice. Or it could be in a school where people are treating other people unjust, and a student stands before their peers and tells them what they're doing is wrong, at the risk of not knowing how they're going to be treated for standing up for justice. Um, those are just a couple of examples that come to mind. Um, and all I'm trying to do is paint a picture of what courage looks like in each of those situations. But courage alone is not enough. Um, we got to do more than do justice, because the text says we also have to love kindness. Some versions of the Bible will say mercy, and others will say kindness. But that has to do with motive. That has to do with motive. And the motive that is godly is the motive of compassion. Why is that important? Isn't it just enough that you're fighting for justice? Why why is why was that added? Why do you think, was it necessary? Could we fight for justice without loving kindness, without being compassionate?
And beg to differ. I don't know. It. I guess the answer is yes and no.
Okay.
You can fight for justice without being compassionate, but are you being godly? I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I struggle with that. I have to
Okay.
put some more on.
Okay. Okay. First lady, I could just see the wheels are turning. It's like,
I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, even you said it sometimes that we don't always do what's right because it's right. Um,
that is
but
the truth.
I would think that my motivation would run low real quick if I don't if I my actions would run low real quick if my motivations are not right.
So you guys gave some good thoughts. I think that it most definitely is possible to fight for justice without being compassionate, because you could be doing it for self promotion. You could be doing it for some other ulterior motive. Um, and you could fight for justice without being compassionate. But when I read the word of God, it's not godly, because the greatest commandment is love. And he commands us to love, and to engage in efforts that don't come from love don't meet the standard of godly. So, yes, you can fight for justice without compassion, but as I understand God's word, and the fact that it's in Micah 6:8 was important enough for um, it to be there. And when I look at the great commandment, what Jesus says is the greatest, and all is summed up in that. I come to the conclusion that yes, you can. It's just you can fight for justice, but if compassion, being moved to action to eliminate or lessen the sufferings of others, is not your motive, uh, then it's not godly. Um, it
But
it can be done, but it doesn't pass God's standard.
thank you for explaining that a little deeper, because um, when I just think, I'm thinking of some of the things I've done in the past, and it's always through compassion, because it's, if I'm going to fight for justice, it's because of others,
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
anything for me to gain, no promotion or anything like that. It's just it, like MLK say, it's always right to do the right thing.
Right, right. And I also think, thank you for sharing that, Didi. I also think sometimes it is the compassion that leads us to fighting for justice. That some folk don't want to fight for justice. It's just their compassion, to care for others. That's what it requires. And without that, uh, there would be far less fighting for justice in the world. we we need compassion. Anjani says, even if you don't know what justice is, you know what caring for another person is, and you know what love for your fellow man is. And when you act because of that, it's justice, even if you don't know anything about social justice movements, you really don't have to. You just gotta care about somebody else and care about their sufferings and act out of love for them. And the image of God is not being upheld, and something in us moves us. Compassion isn't compassion until we've done something. It's maybe sympathy. Look at those people. Somebody ought to do something. But compassion isn't compassion until there's a corresponding action that is compelled from the inside. And so I think in order for it to be godly, there's got to be both. There's got to be justice and there has to be compassion. That they should be inseparable. Um, um, for the believer, and then the last one, uh, do justice, love kindness or mercy, and walk humbly with God. A lifestyle of humility and submission. Again, this was a necessary part of a godly approach to justice because justice belongs to God, not us. So we always have to be following him in the fight for justice because it's his standard that we are seeking to uphold in the world. And we can't get so wrapped up in the work of justice that our relationship with God is not a priority. You can't be so wrapped up in fighting for others as a believer that your relationship with God suffers. Because how are you going to hear from him? Otherwise, it's going to be, you can get caught up in your own thoughts, in your own, this is what I need to do, and this is what needs to be happening. And if you're not constantly walking with God, you will not put yourself in position to follow him, to hear his voice, and you'll just get caught up in the movement. And so we need a framework that involves justice, compassion, and also continuing to walk humbly with God. Our approach to justice would have something missing if those three components were not there. So that's the sermon, and we've done a little bit of reflecting. On Johnny said, "Thank you for making it clear." I hope so. That's a deep subject, and I hope I made it clear as I possibly can. So as we reflect on the truths in the sermon, in this release phase, individually or corporately and corporately. Where have you struggled to take action for justice? What's been holding you back? I know that there are a lot of people who don't fight for justice because they believe that it won't matter and nothing will change. It is a common response to why people don't vote. voting is an act of justice. And some people just don't believe that it matters. Nothing's going to change. They gonna do what they gonna do. And for some, that holds people back.
92 million people did not vote this past election.
Really? 92 million. Wow. Wow. That is mind-boggling. And some of them don't believe. And then some don't care. And then some may not understand. Other things that hold people back, feeling overwhelmed, the lack of empowerment. All of these things have the ability to cause people to not take action for justice. And let's look at the corporate side for a minute. So I think one of the areas that the church in general has sometimes struggled with, misinformed. That's another barrier for, they just got the wrong information. So I'll go back to the personal side. When I was a young warthog, Brenda Council ran for mayor, the city of Omaha. And she lost the election by, I don't know, less than 1,000 votes. And surely there was more than 1,000 people that didn't vote in District 2 in Omaha. It is the classic in the history of our city. That is the classic case for helping people understand that it does matter. That if you do believe and you do understand and what you do does matter, it could have changed the course of history. That's the classic. That's one of the classic examples in my lifetime in Omaha that I can think of. So on the corporate side, why do you think the church, if in fact the church does struggle to be a voice for justice, why do you think that is? First Lady said it was the first election I ever voted in. Oh, really? That mayoral election? Yeah, that was a big deal. So on the corporate side, I don't know if this still exists, but just this whole notion, this American notion of separation between church and state, that's over there and we're over here. I think most definitely can be a barrier. Um, the threat of losing your nonprofit status with the state. That could also, Alma, come under the umbrella of misinformed. If I stand in the pulpit and I tell you you need to vote for Joe Blow, then that would be a violation. But if I stand up in the pulpit and say you need to vote, and if you want to know who I'm voting for, I'll tell you after the benediction. You know, that's not a violation. But that whole separation deal, I think, is a huge barrier. Um, and I can tell you another one. And I'm not saying that this is the way that it ought to be, but I can tell you sometimes that's the way it is. Um, it is difficult enough to pastor a church to focus on the spiritual growth and the well-being of the members of the church and the function of the church holistically and care for the people individually. That is a lot of work. And to add on justice practically can be overwhelming for people who are already up to here with daily functions and the week by week nature of leading a congregation of people. And I'm not saying that's okay, but I am saying that it happens. Yeah. Any other thoughts of the local church, or even us at Antioch? We're not above saying that we've gotten everything right and we don't need to improve, for sure. Sometimes I'll throw another possible one out there. It hasn't been a big deal with me, but there's the thought of there are other organizations in the city that deal with this, and they are more knowledgeable at this, and they have more resources to deal with this. And I'm not going to do this. I got my hands full over here. I'll direct you over there. They do good work in the community. It may not be, it may or may not be out of godly compassion, but we know that they do X or Y well, and that's their mission. That's what they've created to do. And there is, that whole separation deal. I think it's a bigger deal than we think. My mission is to save souls, not to all this holistic stuff, and our primary job is to disciple people, and I just think how we think about the role of the church, for some, has been a barrier. And I certainly think our stance for justice at Antioch could be better. So anyways, that's a little bit about the release. Let's move to receive. What truths do you need to embrace about God's framework for justice? I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways that helps me reshape my thinking has to do with the connection uh, between love and justice, and um, they are not separate. Um, Love leads to justice, to fighting for justice, and to not fight for justice, um, and to not be compassionate is just not an option. And so I think that truth um, was really meaningful for me in my reflection, in my study time, and in the preteen moment. Anybody else? What truths came out of the sermon that kind of helped reshape your thinking? What about corporately? Any truths for us? So at the end, I said fighting for justice is not an individual fight; it's Antioch's fight, and there is a part of me that has just a level of anger at some who claim to be Christians and I don't know what would be the proper phrase. Christian nationalism, I guess, would be the proper term. That their Christianity is intertwined with nationalism, connected to the government, but there is an absence of compassion for people who are disenfranchised in this world. Um, there is a disconnect that is huge with some that are Caucasian Christians, and it is mind-boggling to me how we could read Genesis 1:26 and then read Micah and hear some of the viewpoints and the mindsets and the lack of response for compassion. It is just maddening to me. And so the corporate truth is that fighting for justice is the Christians' fight, and it's not just the Black Christians' fight. It should be the fight of every believer to fight for justice. And the fact that it's not is a problem. And so that corporate truth just helps me to be more strong in my conviction that there's something broken when people who don't look like me profess the same Jesus, but there is a chasm when it comes to compassion. It just don't add up. And that comes from that corporate truth. It's not an individual fight. It's not the Blacks fight. It's not the oppressed fight. It's Antioch's fight. It's every believer's fight. And the truth of the matter is, it's every image bearer's fight. You don't even have to be Christian. You just have to embrace the fact that we all um, um, are created in the image of God. That means that when that's not being upheld, somebody needs to do something about it. And so those those personal ones, those corporate ones, y'all kind of quiet tonight. Last week it was real. Y'all was really chatty. Y'all kind of quiet tonight. So respond. What specific action will you take this week to stand for justice? How can we as a church actively engage in justice work? Where do we as Antiochs? What are we? How is our compassion expressing itself as a congregation?
You know, Pastor, I think sometimes that is one of the barriers is, okay, I believe that and I have compassion, but what do I do? Where do I start? Where do we go? What is the correct response?
So I think that we don't have to look hard. We shouldn't have to look hard. I said this in a sermon a while back ago. Maybe we need to take a field trip and we need to see what suffering looks like. If we're shielded from suffering, then our response for justice will be limited. And perhaps that requires a field trip. I say that literally, figuratively, and maybe literally. If our lives are so isolated from the sufferings of others, our ability to be compassionate will be not as strong. Listening to our community leaders in the fall and to be part of the process and fall in, listening to our community leaders and fall in to be part of the process. That's a good start. So if I were to say Antioch is passionate about these sufferings, it would be hard for me to answer that question. What are we passionate about as a church? Are we passionate about the plight of the homeless? Are we passionate about this or that particular suffering in the world? The First Lady said open door mission. That's a response. What is the passion? If we were passionate about the homeless, then the open door mission would be being moved to action to partner. But does that come from a passion, or does that just come from we picked something? Angel Tree is another example. What's the passion that moves us to engage?
Well, speaking when I think about it for myself, I do not believe that I am isolated from seeing not all, but some areas that need work. But I will say that I do struggle with what do I do about it? There are so many things that I see and that I would love to be a part of, but the reality is I can't do all of it. And so how do I figure out what we're going to do and which way, and I prayed about that even. But yeah, I see that is one area for me. I am very compassionate and I see needs all around, and it's hard to say yes to some and no to others.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Alma says, finding out the need. So, if there were a list of needs in the city of Omaha, I'm just thinking out loud, you know, as a congregation, I don't know if we've defined these are the ones that we are most passionate about. Is it the disparity of food? Is it homelessness? Is it poverty? Is it lack of representation in elected officials? Like, there are a lot of good things to do, but I'm not convinced that we've identified what we are passionate about in terms of all of the brokenness in this world and all of the needs that exist. What two or three rise to the surface as a congregation that says, what makes us weep or pound the table? We got to do such. It's, if nobody else does it, I'm gonna do it. Um, and if we haven't identified those individually, there's no way we can identify those corporately. And so it's one thing to become aware of the needs around us. That's a first step. But then there's got to be compassion is being moved to action from the inside. There's got to be something that connects with our hearts that says this should not be, and we need to do. And there's nobody's called my cell phone and said, Pastor, we need to do something about this because this injustice is, I, I I can't stomach it. Every time I see it, it makes me want to punch a hole in the wall. And what is the burning passion to address the sufferings of this world? If it were, people would just be finding me persistently. We got to do something about this, Pastor. We got to do something about this. This ain't right. This ain't right. This ain't right. And um, maybe that's something we need to pray about and find out what our individual passions are in terms of the sufferings of this world. And then maybe we might find out, hey, we got 3 or 4 people who are passionate about the same thing. Maybe that's a direction that the church ought to go in, ought to consider. And so yeah, I want to challenge us to spend some time reflecting on what moves us. Um, there's a whole bunch of suffering out there, but what moves you? What 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 sufferings connect with your heart that says somebody's got to do something about this? What makes you cry? What makes you pound the table? What makes you on the inside? Where is it that you have to respond? Because it's just in you. And that that's loving kindness. That's loving mercy. So yeah, we've got an assignment to do. We've got some praying. We got some soul searching. Um, we can't solve every problem in the world, but it ought to be a couple of them that us collectively say, "Yep, yep, yep, I'm with you on that." We if don't nobody else do nothing, we're gonna do something here, you know. And so yeah, let's do that. Let's spend some time about that. Let's pray about that. Let's search our souls and see what moves us. And if nothing moves us, then perhaps we need to think about why. Why am I not moved? We got one. Literacy of our youth is one of my compassions. Wow. Thank you for sharing. Does it just burn you up, Alma? Somebody's got to do something about it. Uh, and that's an example. That thank you for sharing that. Um, yeah, we need more of that. What making tutorials available um, is a response to that passion. But man, the fact that there is a passion that just chaps your hide, makes you cry, makes you want to punch a hole in the wall. Something's got to be done about this. Um, we need to know what are we passionate about as collectively, and the only way we can do that again is for us to reflect on that individually and share it, and we'll see what bubbles up. So I'm gonna think about that. So next week I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna tell y'all what are some areas that really tripped my trigger. Um, Out of all the needs that I see, which are the ones that, and if I don't, I need to be able to say I don't, and I need the Lord to help me. I'm fatigued or I'm disconnected or whatever it is that we can address it. But we need to get there, and when we get there, um, I believe God will lead us into the areas to fight for um, justice. Yeah, I don't like when Black people are mistreated by people in power. I don't like it, and um, I need to think about how passionate I am about that. But I know that's one of my issues, and sometimes that looks like helping, encouraging people to vote. But that's one. I need to think about how strong it is, but I know that that's a passion. And people in power mistreat people that look like me, and especially when people who claim to know Jesus, that chaps my hide even worse than politicians is when Christians do that. Because yeah, I feel my blood boiling right now. Um, all right, so we're gonna change the world, but we can't change the world until we got some passions. And so that is our assignment. Great, great conversation. Um, I love me some Antioch Baptist Church. And may the peace of God be unto you.
And also unto you.
Let's
Go
go
change
change the
the
world.
world.